The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, friends, foes, whoever's tuning in. I hope we're all friends. It's Kip Kiefer, ready for another edition of Need to Know. And we've got a lot on the agenda today. During the week, I kind of do a mental checklist of things that I come across that I think you may find interesting and things that I think you need to know. And I've got one kind of central theme today on the show, and I'm going to try and stay on the highway. I've described my style on this podcast in various ways before, and one thing I always say is I always start off with a destination, but then somehow, some way, I find myself getting off an exit ramp somewhere that was not planned, and it's like the old days. If people are getting close to my age or just a little younger, probably remember that way back in the day when you went on a trip on an expressway, it was a lot of nothingness. You just kind of rode along, and occasionally you would come to an exit and you would see a gas station. Yes, they used to have just gas stations off their off ramp that you could go access. Or you would see a billboard that might say, take the next exit and turn right. And it might take you into a town that's 10 or 12 miles off the interstate. It used to feel like you were riding forever in the middle of nowhere. That's kind of how my show goes sometimes. And I'm going to try to stay a little bit more on the course today, because what I want to talk about is the phenomenon we're witnessing, and something that I saw a snippet of over the weekend. I believe it was in Denver, Colorado. But the luminary duo of Bernie Sanders, the almost 90-year-old senator from Vermont, a Jewish American who takes the extreme left progressive position. Of course, that includes support of all of these unrests on campuses, these riots, these rallies, whatever you want to call it, and this pro-Hamas idea that the poor Palestinian people are the victims in the struggle against the evil empire of Israel. It doesn't really add up. We talked about it on the show a couple weeks ago on our Strange Bedfellows show, where the whole conglomerate of this left-wing progressive movement, which has hijacked the Democrat Party, which used to be the party of peace, not war, the party of the American worker, the party that was concerned about unions and all kinds of different things relating to middle class and lower class American citizens. That party has sold out completely. And now the dominant factor is the extreme left wing of the party, led by Bernie Sanders and his companion on this tour of several major American cities. The one, the only Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the great rising star in the Democrat Party, recently identified in a poll when they asked people who is the leader of the Democrat Party, getting only 10% of the vote. About 50 people got votes, but Alexandria AOC, let's just call her. I don't want to keep saying that whole name. AOC was acknowledged as the leader of the Democrat Party by 11% of the respondents. Now, this is a woman who never has really had an original thought. She came out of Columbia University with great plaudits from her professors, not so much for her academic achievements, but for her willingness to soak up like a sponge all of this far left drivel that these academics at this Ivy League institution had force fed her. And she took that degree in social science or whatever it was and immediately landed a really high profile job as a bartender in a Bronx night spot. That's what she parlayed her early Ivy League diploma into until somehow, some way, somebody came up with the bright idea for her to run for Congress. And she did. And I don't know if you all remember the circumstances of her early years in Washington. When she first went there, she did not have enough money to rent an apartment. She had to get an advance from the Democrat National Committee to be able to get an apartment before she earned her first check as a congresswoman. Now she's parlayed that into the being the recognized leader of the party. She's been a proud member of the Squad, which includes several American Muslim, not American people that were brought to the country, settled in Minnesota and Wisconsin and some other places, who have taken advantage of this clearly intentional program to put as many migrants from a certain society or a certain country or a certain mindset in specific areas of the country so they would have a giant voting bloc and start getting their own representatives into the United States Congress. And Tlaib is probably the most prominent one of those, who is completely anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, pro all of the evil factions that have promoted terrorism and killed tens of thousands of people in the Middle East. So you've got the Squad and their great leader, AOC, who once declared that unemployment numbers came down under the first term of President Trump because so many people were having to work two jobs to survive. Well, AOC did not realize that if you have a second job, that doesn't count on the unemployment chart. If you have a job, you are marked off as not unemployed. If you get a second job, it does not impact the statistics of unemployment numbers. Either you have a job, one job, two jobs, no matter what, if you have a job or you are unemployed and basically living off the government. That's the way it kind of works out. She also made the brilliant statement that when she was distressed with the size of a military budget that was before Congress, she said, just look at this. If we just cut out 10 of these planes, 10 of these fighter jets that the military says that they need, how many billions of dollars could that save that we could spend on more important things? So that's the kind of mindset that you have. All of us to also remember the made-for-TV docudrama when she went to the border and she witnessed migrant children having to be taken care of by our military and our border patrol people. And she came out and walked to the far side of the parking lot and staged a crying fit because she was so despondent of what was happening to these poor children. I don't hear her now or anybody else saying, what's happened to the 315,000 children that we registered as coming across the border that are now totally unaccounted for? They've disappeared under the Biden administration. Where are they? Are they being forced into lives of sex slaves or sweatshop workers? What has happened to over 300,000 unaccounted for children who came across the border? Remember, the big issue was the destruction of these families that are separated at the border. Of course, it was never mentioned that in that process, there were tens of thousands of unaccompanied children. So the big family separation concern, the families weren't that concerned about it, who were sending these children, a lot of them only 9 and 10 years old, on their own on these pilgrimages to America, hoping that their children could get in, get established, and eventually bring all the family into the country. They were little emissaries dispatched by their own families to come and try to make that happen. But all of that was conveniently swept under the rug. I preface all this because Bernie and AOC are on this tour. I once, when I was on Talk 99.5 in Birmingham, produced a spoof song that was Bernie and AOC singing Sonny and Cher's I Got You, Babe, because they were coming from the same school of thought, let's put it, as they crusaded for all of this great leftist cause. Bernie Sanders, as you remember, even referred to himself as a Democrat socialist, whatever that means. We know what a socialist is. It's a person that believes that big government should control every aspect of your life, should collect every dime of your earnings, should distribute as they see fit all of the taxpayer money into programs that they hold dear. So that whole agenda, the AOC squad, the Bernie Sanders Democrat socialism, took a big drive off the cliff. Speaking of diverting your path, on the election day, November 5th of last year, 2024, when Donald J. Trump, despite being thrown into every possible scenario to derail his candidacy after the hoax of the COVID pandemic derailed him in 2020. They thought they were rid of him, but in 2024, he made a strong comeback. And despite multiple attempts to put him in jail, to bankrupt him, to assassinate him, and all of the other ridiculous obstacles that were thrown up by a frantic left who knew if he got back in the White House, that what they're seeing happening right now was going to happen. He was going to come in like a wrecking ball and tear it all down. He was going to come in and immediately not just use drain the swamp as a campaign slogan. This time he intended to do just that. And as Trump said, he made a lot of mistakes in the first term, but he still had unbelievable economic success. The country was thriving. He was a shoo-in for re-election. But then the COVID pandemic, which was not an accident, it was an intentional, desperate attempt by the same forces that have been driving the bus here for a number of years. And all of their planning, all of their maniacal scheming took a big slap in the face on November 5th when Trump not only won all 7 swing states and a huge majority in the Electoral College, he also won by over 5 million votes, the popular vote in the United States. And when you factor California and New York and Illinois, some of the biggest population centers in the country, and he still wins by 5 million popular votes, that is a sweeping rebuke of the leftist progressive policy that these people were trying to project. So now with Trump coming in the first, and it might seem strange when I say this, but folks, he's only been in office just a little over 2 months. And look how much he's done already. And look how he has turned around so many of the things that everybody went to the polls, young people, minorities, even people in those states I mentioned. He got higher vote totals in California, New York, and Illinois by far than he got in the first 2 elections he ran in 2016 and 2020. It was a sweeping mandate, and he didn't wait one day to put it into place, signing 200 executive orders to this point, and he's got them just scrambling for cover. And the big theme that you need to know on this program for the Bernie and AOC appearances around the country is we have to fight back harder. That's the message. We have to fight back. We have to fight back against this Donald Trump, this guy coming in and just screwing up everything we've worked to build. This guy coming in and taking us in a completely different direction of DEI and woke and all of the different reforms. We got to fight back harder. Everybody needs to get on board. Despite the fact that we got overwhelmed in the election, this is the mandate of the American people. They want you to fight back. Fight back for what is my question. What are we fighting back for? Do they want to fight back for the American people, for the American workers, for the American way of life, for the Constitution, for the rights of citizenship, and not giving the same rights of citizenship, plus all kinds of extra benefits to over 11 million by estimate, and it could be higher than that, illegal people that came into this country under the Biden administration, which is laughable because Biden wasn't in charge of squat. It was being run by the basically shadow government of Obama appointees that were back in the White House, and by all of the players that I describe every week on this show, including many foreign interests and actors. It was a joke. It was intentional. There was not ineptitude at the border. It was absolutely done on purpose. And not only that, I can't believe that more people aren't knowledgeable or outraged by the fact that not only were people walking across the border unaffected into this country, every week they were bringing plane loads of migrants from all over the world and landing them in the country and turning them loose to go seek their fortune. Of course, they had got to seek their fortune with free housing, free food, free education, in many cases given driver's licenses, which in some states automatically registered them to vote. It was an absolute, it was not immigration. Immigration is a legal process. This was an invasion, folks. This was an invasion from over 180 countries around the world. And these people were recruited. Most of these people, the overwhelming majority of these people, did not straggle into the country, beaten down, downtrodden, weary from their terrible journeys. They were flown to the Mexican peninsula from all over the world, and a lot of times by bus or train or other pieces of transportation, transported right to the border where they could cross into the United States. It was all an orchestrated situation because this movement, this leftist movement, knew full well that if they did not stay that path and bring in all kinds of potentially new citizens, new Americans that were perfectly willing to comply to whatever they requested in exchange for having a chance to escape the, in a lot of cases, hellholes that they were coming from, that they were going to be totally compliant. The dream for the Democrats and the leftists was to transform these people as quickly as possible into citizens so they would have full voting rights, because they knew at the end of the day, even the blocks of voters that they had had for so many years was crumbling faster than they could even imagine. The workers, they had totally, the working man, the blue-collar Americans that had been the backbone of the party had fled the scene already. And also all of the minority and all the special interest groups in identity politics that they tried to isolate and ostracize and radicalize to come around to their way of thinking. At the end of the day, Americans were not going to surrender their sacred rights to free speech and freedom of movement and the American dream of really living life on your own terms with your individual liberties. At the end of the day, they were not going to let that go. The trend was already going on. So desperately, they took it upon themselves to bring in all of these people who most of them crossed the border in brand new clothes, carrying cell phones, having information about where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do, because they were all coached up, they were all prepared, they knew exactly what to say to immigration officers if they were stopped and accosted, talking about seeking asylum, and that administration that was in charge did not get information on why they were seeking asylum. If somebody was immigrating here from, say, Egypt and said, I'm seeking asylum, they just, okay, off you go. From Egypt or a civilized country, and there are some problems, of course, still in all the countries around the world, but you can't just say I'm seeking asylum and not fill in the blanks of why. You seek asylum for a particular reason, and just to go through the motions, these people were just waved on in and given a court date, many times 4 or 5 years down the road. So just go and scunge off the American people, go to the big cities, become defiant, be involved in protests. You don't have a working permit, so you can't have a job. So we'll just take care of you and spend billions of dollars of taxpayer money to have these guest migrants that the people that were pulling the strings on this dreamed that would become American citizens sooner than later, and give them a gigantic voting bloc to ensure their stronghold on power, control, and ultimately the money and revenue that power and control brings in. This is self-serving. This is why that was happening. And this is what Bernie and AOC and everybody who is causing problems for the president, trying to get this new agenda that the American people overwhelmingly support by the polls and at the polls. They are encouraging everyone to fight back against the dissolution of all of the things they work for. They're fighting back, not for you, not for me, not for America, not for the Constitution. They're fighting back to preserve what they've built, and they're fighting back to keep power and control and to resist at all costs any kind of initiative that will screw up their agenda, because it's already in terrible disrepair. And the Democrats are fighting amongst themselves. There's no direction of the party. They want to fight back because they don't have any policy. What do they want you to join in the fight and fight back for? Most of you already voted for the change. You're not interested in fighting back to keep men in women's sports, to allow men to cavort around naked in women's locker rooms because they identify as a female, to keep the borders open. Trump has immediately slammed the door. We are down to next to no border crossings or attempted border crossings now, because the serious people in charge do not use the excuse that, well, there's nothing we can do about the border because we need congressional action. We need legislation. There's been no legislation from Congress. Donald Trump dispatched the military. Donald Trump sent the message loud and clear. If you come here, you're not coming in. And if you're here already, we're sending you out. Because you know what? All of this unrest, the other thing they want you to fight for are these criminal gangs and these cartels and these convicted felons and people that are walking the street that have been arrested multiple times. Another murder in Atlanta last week by a migrant of a 52-year-old mother and grandmother who just basically smothered her to death. We don't know the circumstances, but it just keeps happening. But they want you to fight to keep these people, Trendy Argua, MS-13, the Mexican cartels, all of these nefarious people from all of these criminal organizations, a lot of these countries, or particularly Venezuela, have emptied their prison systems and sent those people to America. Is that who you want your children and grandchildren interacting with on the streets? It's absolute insanity. But they want you to fight to keep those people in the country. They want you to fight to support district judges, the lowest guys on the federal court chain, which they go out and shop for and select based on their ideological makeup and their political partisanship. These are some of the over 200 judges appointed during the last shadow administration with a Democrat Senate. They just rubber stamped 200 radicals, left-wing judges to be in the judicial system. And right now, Donald Trump has been blocked in like 55 instances already in 2 months of policies he's trying to institute. And the raging argument right now is, instead of going out and looking for specific members of Tren de Agua, the Venezuela prison gang, and the MS-13, which has been a vicious gang that has been a criminal enterprise in our country for way too long, instead of just going and rounding those guys up, putting them in cuffs, putting them on a plane and getting them the hell out of here, they're demanding these guys deserve due process. What? Really? Due process for gang members, for murderers, for felons, for people that have raped children, for people that have robbed American citizens, for all kinds of gang style enterprises and scams. But no, we have to give these guys that are tattooed from head to toe with identifying markings and that we've already had in the system through arrests, we have to give them due process before we send them out of the country. Because, oh my God, just think, if one person, one Venezuelan is put on that plane that's not a gang member, that's just a travesty of justice. Well, let me give you a heads up, folks. Anybody in the situation of being deported does not have any justification to be in this country. The Constitution is the ultimate authority. And the Constitution says an American citizen is the only person that has a lawful right to be in the country. Anyone who comes in who is not lawfully here, who has not lawfully entered through the legal process of immigration, is technically a criminal. And if somebody that's come to the country hoping for a better life, who has been in a position to be on one of these planes and shipped out of the country, I have no sympathy, because they didn't go through the process legally. They are by nature, and maybe they're a good man or woman or whatever and had good intentions, but the fact they're in this country, not in the legal process, no one that has that standing is being deported like this. This is the first stage, and the major stage is to track down over 100,000 of these people that are in our country that are absolutely linked to criminal pasts, have criminal records in their countries of origin, or have committed crimes here, and with these liberal DAs have basically been arrested and turned loose again, despite the fact in Massachusetts there are 3 child offenders, child rapists, who were processed and released. I mean, it's absolutely unfathomable what's happened, and this outrage, and they want you to fight to keep these people in the country. It's absolutely ridiculous. What are some of the other just brilliant ideas that they want you to stand up and fight to preserve? They want you to fight to keep the bureaucracy they built in Washington, this administrative state, over 400 federal bureaus, agencies, departments. They want you to fight to keep the non-government organizations, NGOs, which are the recipients of billions of your taxpayer dollars. Congress does allocate the money, but then Congress does not follow up on where the money is spent. The money goes into all of these dark holes of these various organizations. We've talked about it at length on this program, and it ends up getting passed around, and it ends up being campaign contributions to keep the same people that are allocating the money to start with. It all comes back home after going through a long chain of supporters and people that are donors to the leftist causes, and again to overseas entities, all involved in this same evil chain merry-go-round of slush fund cash distribution. And the cash is not theirs to give. It is money that comes out of your paycheck every single week as a taxpayer. That's why this country, I guess we're supposed to fight back to keep our $36 trillion debt growing with leaps and bounds every year, where now the interest on that deficit every year is the number one budget item in our expenditure, even more than our military budget, even more than our Social Security and Medicare programs. It is absolute insanity. That's what they want you to fight for. They want you to fight for the fact that we spend more money per student in this country than any country in the world, and it's not even close. The other thing, it's not even close, the performance of our children academically after the teachers union, which owns and controls the Department of Education, which was established in 1978 by Jimmy Carter, a giant, bloated, woke DEI organization that prides itself on all kinds of programs and all kinds of different ideas on what children should be taught. And at the same time, this agency, which has been given since its inception $3 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $3 trillion from Congress, supposedly to administer education in our country. And what has the result been? Our test scores since 1978, when the Department of Education, aptitude tests, reading aptitude, math aptitude, those numbers have not only dropped, they have plummeted. And we are one of the 40 major developed countries in the world. We are one of the lowest in the world in terms of our educational performance. That's what they want you to fight to continue as Donald Trump moves to do what Terry Quillian, my partner on radio, and I said in 2017, the first day of the first Trump presidency. We had a segment where we talked about what are 3 things that you would do if you were in Donald Trump's shoes right away. And the first thing Terry Quillian said was, we need to cut down and get rid of and shut the doors on forever the Department of Education, to which I held up my iPad to show her that that was the very first thing on my list, and we had not collaborated. So Donald Trump, now just 8 years later, has finally made that step to start the process to shut down this bloated, unnecessary federal agency. Are you also going to fight to resist Elon Musk, the smartest businessman, the most successful human being, arguably on the planet, who has donated his time and taken away from his pursuits on his own businesses to try and find ways to identify waste and fraud and abuse? And I always add the fourth aspect, theft, which we just talked about, because so much of the money that's being taken out by all of these branches of government, not anybody you elect, but these are people protected by government unions who feel bulletproof with a lifelong employment status, that they can do whatever the hell they want and shuffle money any direction they want. The most blatant example recently was the attempt by the Environmental Protection Agency to give Stacey Abrams, a political hack in Georgia, but a loyal Democrat, $2 billion for some new ridiculous climate oriented organization that is going to provide more efficient appliances, supposedly to help people with costs, but it really is to kowtow to this climate change agenda where anything gas has to go. Do you want to fight for the lack of drilling in our country, the lack of energy production, the shutdown of the Keystone Pipeline, the driving up of fuel prices, heating and cooling prices that are on your utility bill every month? We have more energy reserves in this country than any place in the world, and this previous administration cut it off. Then your prices went through the roof. Is that what you want to fight for? Are you fighting for all of these things? That's what they want you to fight back on. And all of these issues, almost every one, from the men playing women's sports to the decline in education to this giant bloated bureaucracy, this cash orgy that the Democrats and leftists have been indulging in for years and years, your cash, that's what you want. That's what they want you to fight for. Issues that in polls, 80% of Americans in many cases support the fact that these just completely misbegotten notions by the left, they only have 20% supports in a lot of areas. But there's so much on the upside down part of it. They're not fighting for America. They're not fighting for you. They're fighting for their own preservation to what they have built, the most corrupt government in the world right now. It puts some third world banana republics to shame, the extent and the money that these people have been able to generate through all this fraud, abuse, waste, and yes, theft. So if you want to fight, if you want to join Bernie and AOC, if you identify with them and you want to fight for all of these things, just go sign up your petition and get after it. If you want to fight Elon Musk, one of the most brilliant men in the world who's trying to help all Americans and improve the efficiency of our government and take away the waste, abuse, and the theft that is inherent in the system, if that's what you want to fight for, if you want to throw Molotov cocktails at Teslas, which is not only irresponsible and destructive, but potentially lethal if somebody's standing in the wrong spot at the wrong time, if you want to kill innocent people there to look at a car or to work at a dealership, to lash out, it's time to sign on the dotted line and get in line with AOC and Bernie, because they want you to fight for all of these things to preserve what they want, not what the American people want, and not what the United States Constitution demands. It was the edict. It was a sweeping mandate of the American people in the election to put Donald J. Trump in office. He's executing the mandate like no one who's ever occupied that office has ever. More accomplishment in 2.5 months than whole administrations historically in many times and many places in our country's history. So if you want to fight for Bernie and AOC, have at it. But know that you are in the absolute overwhelming minority, because nobody with a right mind wants the country these people want, which they are the beneficiaries, and all the rest of us are cast into these subservient roles to put our hard-earned money not only into all of these programs that they use to maintain their stranglehold on power and control, but into their own personal pockets. That's why they're all millionaires and we're all struggling to make ends meet. I'm Kip Keefer. That's Need to Know for this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Back with you next Monday.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.